How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program. Now, I want to talk to you about the, speed camera issue. It is an open line Friday. You can text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777 to get all the information you need. And I get in trouble sometimes over this issue. So I'm opposed to speeding cameras. And I have made it a big deal on this program in my state because local governments in Georgia have used them for money, not for safety, and they claim it's for the children. It's always for the children. And you have a lot of people who mean well, who say, well, just don't speed. Well, now I have more data to complain about the speed cameras beyond the state of Georgia and just how bad they are. The speed cameras in Georgia, let me explain to you how they work. They're put in front of schools, and it's claimed that they're to protect the children. Now, every one of you lives in a society, I suspect, in a community where you have the yellow flashing lights in school zones. And you know that the speed drops in those school zones. In most places, like 45 goes down to 25 or 35 goes down to 25, something like that. In Georgia, the way local communities do the speed cameras is the speed cameras don't just operate when the yellow lights are flashing. They operate all day long. They're school zone cameras, and they will give you a ticket all day long, even when the school zones aren't in effect, even when there are no kids present. In many communities have put the school cameras in areas where there's no sidewalk, there's no way for the kids to even get into the school walking. It has nothing to do with school safety. And now you're thinking, well, Erickson, just don't speed in the school zone. Okay, here's the part that you're missing for those of you who say just don't speed. When the yellow lights aren't flashing, you're 45 miles an hour in front of the school. It's 25 miles an hour when the lights aren't flashing, or when the lights are flashing. When the lights are not flashing, how fast can you drive in front of the school? The speed limit's 45 miles an hour. When the yellow lights are flashing, school zone's in effect, it's 25 miles an hour. So when the yellow lights are not flashing, how fast can you drive in front of the school? It's a trick question because in many areas of the state of Georgia, the local schools have the camera set to still enforce 25 miles an hour even when the yellow lights aren't flashing. So you should be able to go 45 miles an hour, but the schools set the cameras to give you a ticket if you go over 25 miles an hour, even when the lights aren't flashing. Between say 7 a.m. and the school zone's in effect from like 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and they do it from like 6:30 in the morning to 9:30 in the morning. And then it's 45. And you get a speeding ticket outside of that window. You get a speeding ticket if you go over 45 miles an hour. But you don't know. That's the problem. You don't know. They've been very nebulous about it. And then there have been examples of school systems that didn't want the cameras, but they were bullied by the local government into putting them in. In my community, Several of the private schools in town did not want the cameras, and the local elected officials told the private schools, if you don't put the cameras in, we're not going to help your school. Your roads in front of the school might not get paved. The police may not come if you have a problem. If you're not putting the cameras in, the local government's not going to help you. The schools didn't want the cameras, and they were forced to put them in. And then in my community, when it turned out the local governments had bullied the wealthy private schools, the wealthy private schools got their cameras turned off. They're still there, but they're turned off, and you don't get tickets. If you're a wealthy white person, your schools don't give you tickets, and the poor black children, their parents are the ones getting the tickets. And then the next problem is they leave the cameras going until 6 p.m. School is well out, all of that. But the cameras are still active, so the teachers leave the school in the afternoon, and the teachers get the tickets. I know more than one teacher who has gotten a ticket from one of these things because the teacher stayed late to help kids or work on a project, pulled out of the school. It's 6 p.m. School zone's clearly not into effect. Boom. Went 45 and a 45, but the speed zone cameras were coded to 25 miles an hour. And guess what you have to do? You are presumed guilty. So you have to write letters or hire a lawyer to write letters, and the poor people don't do that. Now, that's my situation. I'm morally opposed to the cameras because I think it is offsetting law enforcement, and the other catch is the money goes to a private company. Doesn't even go to the local government. It's a private company. So that's my concern here. But now I have more ways to complain about the cameras because my buddy Ben Domenech just highlighted this. Washington, D.C. has speed cameras. Now, unlike Georgia, where they're in front of schools, in Washington, D.C., they're all over the place. But in Washington, D.C., it's not just that they're all over the place. They mostly have them at the district lines, so it's the residents of Virginia and Maryland that are getting ticketed. Some of them don't pay their tickets. But in 2025, Washington, D.C. generated $6,491,227 on a single speed camera in Washington, D.C. One speed camera in the District of Columbia generated basically $6.5 million. Ben Domenech points out why. You have any guess? Wasn't a school zone. They pointed the camera towards the emergency room for Sibley Hospital. So people who were in medical crisis rushing to the emergency room generated $6.5 million in revenue for Washington, D.C. Your wife goes into labor. The baby is coming. You rush her to the hospital. Washington, D.C. positioned a speed camera to make sure you would get a speeding ticket for trying to get your wife to the hospital. Your kid's in the car, struggling to breathe, having a terrible asthma attack. You're rushing your child to the hospital. You get fined for speeding to try to save your kid's life because Washington, D.C. pointed a camera to make sure it picked up the people speeding into the entrance of the Sibley Hospital emergency room. Now, all of you people who dogmatically insist you just shouldn't speed and you'll be fine, are you okay with that? Are those of you who just, your halo's a little crooked and you straighten it up and you say, well, you wouldn't get a ticket if you didn't speed? Are you okay with giving tickets to the parents who are speeding because their child is in the back seat dying and they're trying to get them to the emergency room? Are you okay with that? Do you have any exceptions for the speed limit? Any at all? Well, nope. I'm sorry you went 50 miles an hour because your kid was dying in the back seat. The speed limit was 25 right there, and you should have known better. Should have let your kid die. I'm sorry your husband died of the heart attack because you were required to do 25 miles an hour and couldn't speed to the hospital. Gosh, waste good carpet in the car because your child was delivered in the back seat because you couldn't get to the hospital in time because, well, you had to do 25 miles an hour because that was the speed limit. I'm sure all of you virtuous people who always say simply don't speed, I'm sure you're very smug and righteous. Well, nope, the kid should have died because God forbid you speed to save your child's life. Washington, D.C. is taking advantage of that. That's why speed cameras are bad, because cities abuse them. You know, it's not just speed cameras they have in the country. They have the red light cameras, and they're very quick to tell you that crashes have gone down where they have red light cameras. You know what they don't tell you? Why the revenue goes up? Because cities reduce the yellow light time. You know, if you're an experienced driver in an area, you get used to how long the yellow lights last, usually 4 or 5 seconds in some places. Some places up to 8 seconds a yellow light lasts. And in virtually every single community where there are red light cameras, the red light cameras, not all the cameras in the community, just the ones where the red light cameras are, they shorten the yellow light time. So you've got two cameras, or you've got two red lights in succession. One has the speed camera, one doesn't. The red light without the camera, the yellow light might last for 5 seconds. Get up to the speed camera, it's going to last for 2 seconds. You're going to get the ticket. Governments are not using the speed cameras to make things safer, and you're a deluded fool if you actually believe that these cameras make people safer. You know, in Georgia, the number of incidents of children being hit by cars in front of schools hasn't gone down in areas where there are cameras or not cameras. In fact, it's a very rare occurrence for a child to get hit in a school zone already. No lives have been saved by having the cameras. It's just been a wealth-generating scheme, and it's a wealth-generating scheme made possible by the virtuous ignorance of the people who say, well, you just shouldn't speed anyway. And then pay no attention to how they alter the speed cameras at times of day without notice to the public to generate the revenue. And only the people smart enough or good enough or wealthy enough to have time to write a lawyer or write a letter or hire a lawyer to write a letter are able to get out of it. And that's the final problem here, is that the wealthy rarely pay these things because the wealthy have the time and connections to get out of them. It's the poor people who don't. So you're taxing the poor people, more often poor non-white people, while you virtuously say, well, they shouldn't have been speeding. This one's flabbergasted me. Washington, D.C., Axios has the story of the speeding cameras. One camera in Washington, D.C. generated $9.2 million. Another one generated $7.7 million for a total in 2025, a total of $65 million. By the way, you know why in other areas of Washington, D.C., like, for example, one camera in Washington, D.C. generated $8.5 million? Because they went from a 55 to a 25 without a speed limit reduce sign ahead, and they did it in a downhill section. In another that generated $7.7 million, do you know why it generated $7.7 million, the speed camera? Because it's in a deeply unsafe area of town where gunshots and carjackings are a significant threat, and they reduced the speed limit to 25 miles an hour so that you're forced to go 25 miles an hour through an area of town where you have the highest propensity of getting shot or carjacked. But just do the speed limit and you won't get a speeding ticket. That's what they tell you. That's what they tell you. And it's not just Washington, D.C., and it's not just Georgia. And by the way, I supported a guy named Stephen McNeil. And one of the big issues for Stephen McNeil is he's opposed to the speed cameras. And one of his opponents claimed to be, and I have heard from multiple people that the person wasn't actually really opposed to the speed cameras. I was like, nope, can't give support there. I know 3 different people who supported this guy because of his opposition to the speed cameras, and he won the race or won the Republican part of it. I just think that Republicans, you want to seize on a great populist issue. Wherever you are in the country, you should oppose the speed cameras. And you know how I know it's a great populist issue? I bring this up not because of my pet peeve today, and I bring it up not because of the data out of Washington, D.C. I bring it up because the President of the United States of America, Donald John Trump, has announced he intends to get rid of speed cameras in Washington, D.C. and hopes Republicans everywhere will oppose them because they're just a backdoor tax on the working man. And he's right, and the data proves it. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. Be patient with me. I will get to you. I promise I will get to you. This hour of the program brought to you by Van Allen Golf. Go to vanallengolf.com. You can check them out. Text golf to 33777. And you, my friends, can check out their fabulous golf putter. By the way, I got to tell you, I'm really disappointed in this. 57 Republicans joined pretty much all the Democrats, except 4, to allow the government to remotely control your vehicle. It is one of the dumbest things ever that 57 Republicans voted with this against the Thomas Massie piece of legislation. And the Thomas Massie piece of legislation would get rid of this effort by the government to essentially put a breathalyzer in your car. It's just going to drive up the cost of vehicles. And they don't care. It's just the most ridiculous thing. They want to be able to remotely control your vehicle. It is an absolute nanny state issue. So the legislation would require that cars essentially come with a breathalyzer. And if you fail the breathalyzer, you can't start your car. Is that not the dumbest thing ever? And some of you are like, well, we'll get rid of drunk drivers. Y'all, I don't understand the idiots out there, and you are an idiot if you think it's a good idea, that you just keep adding more and more and more and more and more to cars, and you drive up the cost. At some point, there's a cost-benefit analysis that if you're a wealthy person saying, I think it's a wonderful idea, screw you, because you're not thinking about the poor people who need to get to work and need a car to get to work, and they're not going to be able to afford a car. I just use your sense. It's not about you and your virtuousness and well, you shouldn't be. No, you shouldn't, but you shouldn't have to have it in your car either for your car to be able to start. It just drives up the cost. That's all government's doing these days is taxing the working class. The speed cameras, car breathalyzers, all this nonsense. You know, Old Glory Bank is trying to drive down your costs to be able to do banking and to be free with your banking and to protect your banking rights. You go to oldglorybank.com/Eric today. You can get an account with them. They're actually about to de-SPAC. They were capitalizing through an SPAC. Instead, they're going to go on the NASDAQ. I'm really excited for them. You'll be able to buy them as a publicly traded bank. Oldglorybank.com/Eric is where you want to go to get an account with them. If you're a business, you know, the left has targeted a lot of conservative businesses and a lot of conservatives. Old Glory Bank is going to protect your right to bank. They've been able to grow protecting businesses and working with businesses and individuals, veterans, first responders, active duty military. Oldglorybank.com/Eric. Your kid can get a custodial account. There are just so many great things to say about this bank. It is my bank. I've got a checking and a savings account with them. Oldglorybank.com/Eric. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Wonderful people, great bank. I've enjoyed using them. You can too at oldglorybank.com/Eric. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. We've got a number of stations in Virginia, but this isn't just a Virginia story. It's become a national story. I mentioned the other day Democratic monoculture now. It doesn't matter where the Democrats take power, whether it's in Illinois or California or New York or even Virginia, where they campaigned as moderates, immediately got into office and have just gone insane. They're now suddenly local police are no longer allowed to cooperate with ICE in Virginia. They've got a massive budget surplus thanks to the stewardship of the Republicans who were in charge, and now they're raising taxes already. They're moving to protect trans kids in sports and in schools and force boys into girls' locker rooms. And they also have decided now they want to engage in this very, very, very radical redistricting plan, and they can't under Virginia law. And so they're going to repeal the law that prevents them from doing it, so then they can do it. The deputy Republican leader in Virginia, Israel O'Quinn, is joining me by phone. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Sure.
I got to tell you, I don't know if your head is spinning, but watching the Democrats who claim to be moderate rush into Virginia and try to pull that state as hard left as quickly as possible just seemed a little wild.
It's been a pretty radical shift from the campaign trail till now. That's for sure, and certainly from the inauguration, which was last Saturday, through this first week of session. A lot of things that we were led to believe wouldn't happen certainly have begun to happen. Remains to be seen what the governor will do with some of this stuff when it hits her desk, but certainly we're headed in that direction pretty quickly.
So let's talk about redistricting, because my understanding was that in Virginia, the timeline wouldn't allow it, and so they've just decided to scrap the timeline.
Yeah, so Virginia is an interesting state. There's a lot of discussion about what Texas or California or North Carolina has or hasn't done, but Virginia is very, very different from most of these states. We passed a constitutional amendment back in 2020 to take partisan gerrymandering away from the legislature, which it had had since the beginning of time, and gave it to a nonpartisan commission. That was passed through a constitutional amendment in the General Assembly and ultimately approved by the voters by a 2/3 margin, which, in a state as closely divided as Virginia, it's difficult to get anybody to agree 2/3 on much of anything. But the tricky part is that this is a 2-year process. You can't just come in, stick a constitutional amendment on the ballot and go with it. You have to pass it in a year. Then you have to have an intervening General Assembly election, and then you have to pass it again in its identical form before it can go to the ballot. So what we basically had was back in October, about a week before the election, I think it was October 29th, we had a called meeting of the Elections Committee and were presented with a constitutional amendment to take congressional redistricting out of the bipartisan commission and give it back to the legislature through 2030. That's all fine and good, but they were claiming that the intervening election was going to be a week later. The sad part is that the election had already begun. Early voting started on September 19th in Virginia. We have 45 days of early voting. So the election had already begun. They passed the constitutional amendment through, claimed the election that next week was the intervening election, and then we literally dealt with this on the very first day of session this year in an effort to get it onto the ballot in a special election for a standalone amendment on April 21st.
Good grief. And the courts have been okay with this?
So there's a suit currently filed down in the western part of the state, and that is still working its way through the process. We were presented with a bill this week, yesterday actually, which we can talk about more if you'd like, that takes the jurisdiction away from anywhere except the city of Richmond. So now it seeks to shift a case that's already been filed in another jurisdiction into the circuit courts here in the city of Richmond. And so to say the courts have been okay with it is certainly not accurate. They've yet to formally rule, but I think that they understand the weakness of their argument and probably the illegality of claiming that the election hadn't started and wish to move that to a friendlier court.
Yeah, I bet so. Is there anything outside of a lawsuit that the Republicans can do right now?
So the courts are certainly the most viable path. Democrats, of course, just won the governor's mansion. We did not have state Senate elections this year, so they have a 21-19 majority in the state Senate, and they picked up 13 seats in the House, which gives them a 64-36 majority. So from the legislative side of things, there really isn't much that we can do to actually stop it. So the courts are certainly one way, and then assuming this actually makes it all the way to the ballot on April 21st, then the voters get the opportunity to reaffirm what they affirmed back in 2020, that they don't want the legislature drawing partisan maps, particularly one which, with the maps that have been floated at this point, shows us going from 6 Democrats and 5 Republicans in our congressional delegation to 10 Democrats and 1 Republican.
That's just wild. So Those of you just tuning in, I'm talking to the deputy Republican leader, Israel O'Quinn, from the Commonwealth of Virginia.
There you go.
Yeah. My brother-in-law and sister lived in Norfolk for years. He was in the Navy, spent a lot of time up there. And you got to remind myself, it's a Commonwealth. What do you think that Republicans in other states who have been real hesitant to move forward? Because, you got now in Maryland also, there's been a big push all of a sudden after saying they wouldn't. What do Republicans elsewhere need to be paying attention to?
Well, certainly I think they need to understand that this is a win-at-all-costs move. And, it remains to be seen how quickly other states could potentially get a map drawn. Most states allow their legislature to redistrict at any point. They can redistrict midterm. Most states do that once a decade after the census comes out. But certainly, I think that there's an arms race that's been touched off, and everyone should be looking at what, Republican or Democrat state, what their worst case scenario is. And certainly in Virginia, worst case scenario is 10-1. You're never going to redistrict well enough or gerrymander well enough to get a Democratic congressman from far southwest Virginia, but you can certainly rig those maps and get several more in other parts of the state.
Yeah, it seems really like Republicans in so many states have been so hesitant. They didn't want to open this can of worms, and it got open for them whether or not they wanted. And so now it's kind of a situation where they got to start paying attention that Democrats are doing things and also trying to rig the game to do things that they otherwise couldn't do. And on top of that, you got all the other insanity that the Democrats are rushing forward to in Virginia. I just got to think that particularly in your district down in Southwest Virginia, that having local law enforcement telling them you're not going to cooperate with ICE isn't going to work well.
Yeah, it's you're right. It's and to be fair, we haven't really had those kinds of situations in Southwest Virginia, but I think in a situation where you need the cooperation of particularly the state police, that they should be able to render that assistance, whether it's ICE or any other situation that's called for. So yeah, certainly that was, I think that was maybe the first or second executive order that the governor signed after the inauguration on Saturday afternoon. So yeah, quickly trying to roll back a lot of the things that Governor Youngkin had put in place.
Now, you're down in Bristol, so I'm talking to Israel O'Quinn in the House of Delegates. He's deputy GOP leader, represents Southwest Virginia, the Abington and the Bristol area. I just keep waiting for the Democrats to say they're going to have to only run electric-powered cars at the Bristol Motor Speedway. It's just a matter of time before they try to ban NASCAR.
Yeah, it's I can tell you that wouldn't be very popular in Virginia for sure, but home to I always say two and a half NASCAR tracks. While we have Martinsville, Richmond, and while the Bristol track is technically in Tennessee, it's probably 10 minutes from my house. So we claim it nonetheless. So yeah, let's just put it this way: I was not impressed by the electric stock car that NASCAR tested last year.
Yeah. So I've been to the Bristol. My brother-in-law and sister lived in Virginia, are big NASCAR fans. I've been to the Bristol and I've been to the Richmond one as well. And I forgot that Bristol was in Tennessee, that close to the line. Look, yeah. So Israel, in the legislative fights, you guys now, you're out of power. I still can't believe they threw Jason out of the Attorney General's spot. There is this backlash, and Virginia is a pretty blue state, except there does tend to be this ebb and flow depending on Washington and the reaction of who is in the White House as to the Republicans do. Moving forward for the Republicans in Virginia, what do you think the game plan needs to be for the GOP in the state?
Sure. I think we just have to keep highlighting, what was said on the campaign trail versus what actually comes out of the state capitol. And what was said on the campaign trail has already proven to be pretty different. Back in 2019, Congresswoman Spanberger came out as adamantly opposed to gerrymandering and didn't seem that keen on this, along the campaign trail. And campaigned as a moderate, touted being the most bipartisan member of the Virginia congressional delegation. So, for us, we've got to keep highlighting how these policies are bad, how this affordability agenda really isn't doing anything to make life more affordable. I will never understand how you can raise numerous taxes on people and claim that you're making their lives more affordable. So we just have to continue to draw that contrast. And you're right. Virginia voters have a tendency to self-correct pretty quickly. This is my 15th year in the House. I've served under 5 different speakers, and they are not term limited. So, things can change in a hurry. You're right. It tends to be reactionary with what goes on in Washington. And, what you do today could come back to bite you tomorrow. So yeah, I mean, we've got to keep digging. We got to keep fighting the fight. And we really just have to keep highlighting, how bad these policies are and how much they're really going to cost Virginians.
Well, they are, and I hate it for you, but I appreciate you stopping by to talk about this, and it certainly is an alarm bell should be going off to the rest of the Republican states that have kind of slow-walked redistricting to see what they're doing in Virginia right now. They're coveting power and doing everything they can to get it. So thank you very much for stopping by. Best of luck to you guys.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely. Israel O'Quinn, he's the deputy Republican leader of the Virginia House of Delegates. And just to re-highlight this, for those of you who, I was a little bit ambivalent at first, and I thought it was a bad idea for the president's team to try to push this issue, but they did. Texas ran with it, and the backlash from the Democrats now to the extent that they are not only trying to change the law in Virginia to be able to make this happen, they're trying to force courts to give up the case if they think the court might not be sympathetic to them. They're doing everything they can to stack the deck and rig the game to be able to force redistricting in the state of Virginia, contrary to the Constitution of the state of Virginia. And they want to wipe out the GOP. And they can say the Republicans started it, and that's fair. It actually is. It is the Republicans, led by Donald Trump, who started this, pushed Texas to do it. Texas started. Now you got the California situation, the Missouri, Ohio, Indiana. Indiana wasn't going to because Maryland wasn't going to. Now suddenly Maryland is trying. Virginia is trying. Other Republican states are now going to have to get into this fight and do it. You can't give up. I will tell you, in a couple states, there are some Republicans who are so put off by Donald Trump at this point, they're not going to fight the fight for their constituents because they want to spite the president. And I just don't think whether you like the president or not, if you're a Republican, you need to protect the interests of your constituents. And you're going to have to engage in a fight you didn't want to fight because the other side intends to annihilate you at the ballot box. And you might as well stand up and engage. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425, this Open Line Friday. Let me go to Lynn calling from St. Cloud, Florida. Welcome to the show, Lynn. How are you? Thanks for being patient.
Hi. Hey, I'm fine. Yeah, nice talking to you.
You too.
I want to say before about what happened to your daughter, man, that's reprehensible. I mean, hate speech is bad except for these guys. Somebody should have washed their mouth.
Yeah,
anyway,
so ironically, Lynn, I got to just say something. I was texting to a friend of mine. My daughter said that, it was the Muslims were the nice ones. It was the white British people who were the ones calling women, particularly her, the awful stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to talk about, that's a good point. I'm glad you said it. I want to talk about battleships. The idea of battleships is that basically what I understand from is just World War II. They're obsolete because they're just too big. And what are they going to engage? They're supposed to engage other battleships, and
right.
They would never ever be able to engage many battleships because the planes would wipe them out if they got near anything.
Yeah, the president really wants this new battle, and I guess my understanding is they're calling something a battleship, but it's actually not the size of a battleship. It's more a destroyer or a frigate in some cases.
Well, that sounds better, yeah. But when Exocet Missile took out the Argentine battleship in just 1980s, and practically everybody went down with the ship. So too many men. Depends on how many men are on it, I guess, and
Right.
what is the expense? Yeah, the expenditure is, if it's,
Well,
the
the way
millions.
they've structured this, Lynn, I don't know if you've heard the details on this, and for those of you who don't know what Lynn is talking about, the president wants more battleships. Battleships are cool. I mean, I would love battleships, except they're really big ships that you don't necessarily need big ships like that in age of submarines and drones. So they're actually going to be smaller ships. They're going to essentially call them, I forget, the Trump class, battle something. And they're not even going to approve the first hull until the summer after Donald Trump leaves office. And that is not a coincidence, my friends. The wide world of defense appropriations on Capitol Hill and the lobbyists are all very frank behind the scenes that the Navy is falling behind in building ships. The president is obsessed about a class of ship that is not needed. And so to humor the president, they're going to call it the Trump class, and they're not going to produce the hull until after he's out of office. So they have time to change to what they really want. This is all a bunch of elaborate theater to humor the president of the United States. And if you think I'm wrong on that, you go talk privately to some of the appropriators on Capitol Hill, people in the Defense Department, and the people within the shipbuilding community, and you will hear the same story over and over, that they're just beating their head against the wall, that they're having to humor the president with this. They think that it's going to put us behind. It's not needed. It's going to be blown up very easily by the Chinese or the Russians. There are other things they want to build that they think would be better, capable of withstanding the threats that of modern seafaring warfare, but the president wants this, so the president gets this, so they're going to delay it until he's out of office so they can change it as soon as he's gone. It's just remarkable. You know, what's also remarkable is how your data gets traded online. There are secret shadow scores companies use to judge if you're of high value, even if you're not a VIP. They want to sell it to target you. Customers ignored. It struggles to get it off. That's why Incogni exists. It works in the background to wipe your private data from people's search sites, data brokers, hidden databases. Probably don't even know these things exist. You go online, you Google your name and the city in which you live, you'll be amazed at how much information they can get about you. Your cars. In some websites give the VIN number of your vehicle, the relatives who live with you, the social media links to people who live with you. It's wild what people can get online about you. Incogni works to get it all deleted. It's Incogni. Incogni, like incognito. Incogni.com/Eric gets 60% off the regular rate. Incogni.com/Eric. Incogni.com/Eric.